Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Software Development Podcast. Our guest today is Jack Kennedy. Jack is the co-founder and CTO of Whippy AI, an all-in-one AI and automation platform for businesses. Jack, thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Krish. Appreciate it.
If you could give a quick introduction about yourself to our audience, Jack, and then we can sort of jump right into the topic.
Yeah, for sure. As you were somehow able to guess from my background, I'm based in Europe, so I live in Dublin in Ireland. But I went to UCLA for a bit, studied engineering and machine learning. Was working for a company out in LA, and back in 2020, left there with one of the co-founders of that company, David, and started Whippy. So we've been working together since 2019, 2020, and started Whippy at the end of 21, going into 2022.
Amazing. Good to hear that. Just before we started the podcast, I was able to guess reasonably accurately that you were situated somewhere that was not US and it looked like Europe. Your background, sort of, I was able to tell it's just beautiful. I mean, every part of Europe is beautiful, so no surprises there. And you said you're based out of Dublin, right?
Yeah, exactly, Dublin.
Beautiful. Hopefully, I can, get to that part of
Yeah,
the world someday.
yeah, we'll have to get you over.
Lovely. So we can get started. So the topic for today, again, it's loosely defined. We want to talk about the challenges and implications of AI. So let's talk about that for the next 45 minutes to an hour. And sometimes I can go as long as you want, Jack. So if it's too long and you have to go, just let me know and we can call it
Sure thing.
wraps. Uh, Before we get into the topic, if you could just tell us a little bit about Whippy. It'll
Yeah,
sort of help us understand you and the company, and then we can get to the topic.
yeah, for sure. So Whippy is an all-in-one communication and automation platform, right? Which sounds pretty broad, but at the high level, what we say is every business has to communicate with their customers, right? And there's three main modes of communication in a business, right? So there's manual, and that could be, hey, you send one of your customers a text, an email, or you pick up the phone and call them, right? There's automated communication. When this thing happens, do that. When my receipt or when my invoice is due, send an email to follow up. And then last and like the most recent is AI, right? So you can have a full-on generative AI experience, potentially replacing an employee, right? It knows a little bit about you. It knows a little bit about your business. It can ask you questions over the phone or via text. Um, and so we combine those three modes of communication across every channel. So email, SMS, and voice. Um, and for every function, right? So customer support, sales, and marketing. Um, as I mentioned kind of earlier, started in 2021, and we mostly serve SMBs to Fortune 2000 size companies.
Lovely. I did look, you guys up before we got into the podcast, but let me understand a bit more, and then maybe that'll lead us into our topic as well. So let me actually, we'll include the links to your company and to your profile, in the
For sure.
podcast. I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. Um, yep. Cool. So we are a bunch of engineers around the company, but so prospecting is not something that comes naturally to us.
Yeah.
If you'd asked me to spell prospecting a year ago, I would have been like, I think I know, but I'm not so sure, right? But a year goes by, you feel like you have some idea, long ways to go. But in this journey, we have used some sales automation platforms, and I want to know if it's related. At least I know what I should be asking. If not, at least I can do course correction. We've
Yeah.
used certain platforms, Jack, where you can set up these sequences, because I saw the word sequences there. If it's the
Yeah.
same thing, you pick people, folks, or companies, and you automate just about everything you're trying to do. So these emails get sent out, and then once if there is a response, you have the sequence tells you what to do next or what not to do next, and so on and so forth. Is
Yeah.
your product anywhere related to that, or are there two different things?
No, 100%. So that's actually a great question. So yes, you can do sales sequencing inside the platform, right? But one problem that we saw when we started, right? Let's just take email. So a lot of companies will use Zendesk for email customer support, right?
Right,
You've kind of seen that, when you get a thread of like 15 emails in your inbox and like trying to solve some kind of customer support ticket, right?
right,
Then they'll use another platform, let's say like Mailchimp for email marketing, right? And then they'll use another platform, like you said, for email sales outreach, like Outreach or Apollo, right? And so now a business is running 3 systems with 3 different integrations, with 3 different contracts, 3 different customer service and support reps, all just to send emails, right? And so with Whippy, we're bringing those tools into one place. So it's not just sales prospecting, but that is one thing you can do with the platform for sure.
Okay, so I'm familiar with Apollo as well.
Yeah.
So you're saying instead of using Apollo, we could be using Whippy to managing. So you have, in other words, do you have customer like user data, like where we able to look for companies and people and add them to a sequence and send emails out?
Not exactly like that, where you can just take any data from the internet, but we do have the ability to bring data in. So we're normally, in most cases, connecting to people's CRMs, on all that kind of stuff, and they could connect with things like Zoom info, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, and that was just one part of what you're doing, you said, right? I know you said three things. What are the
Exactly.
other two? What are the other two?
Exactly. So that's on the sales side, right? So that's like, let's say, sales automation, sales communication. You have also marketing automation, right? So that could be an email campaign, an SMS campaign, right? And then lastly, you have customer support, right? So that could be, I call your business, I go onto your website and use a live chat, any of those sorts of things, right? So it's all of those forms of communication in one tool.
Okay, and so companies such as us, like we are a startup based out of the suburbs of Washington D.C.,
Yeah.
and one of the products we have, like I mentioned to you, is B2B APIs, where we have our APIs published on AWS Marketplace and other hubs, and we prospect folks on primarily on LinkedIn and some
Yeah.
other places to reach out. We could potentially be using Whippy.
You could, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I will check that out, probably follow up with you with
Yeah.
questions later. Okay, that's a good introduction. We have, and just one more thing before we actually get right into the topic is what are some of your unique selling propositions? In other words, if I were using other platforms, like let's say I mentioned Apollo to you, what are one or two or three things maybe that you do perhaps differently or better than your competitors?
Yeah, great question. So first off, it is the segment of the market that we actually target, right? So we specifically focus on businesses, and I say whose customers are in the real world, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of our customers are law firms, staffing agencies, pharmacies, healthcare companies, all this kind of stuff, right? And the reason why I classify them as like a group of companies is if you're a customer of one of those businesses, you're generally walking around with your phone, with your, you're not sitting at a software platform all day, right? You're not a
Right.
developer, right?
Right.
And so the first thing that makes us a little bit different is like where we focus on, right? So we're heavily in SMS and in voice, right? So if you want to build complex, you know, uh, IVR phone systems, if you want to send 10,000 text messages, you can do all that kind of stuff. So while we have email and those other things, we actually focus first on other channels, right? Phone and text, as an example. WhatsApp could be another, right? The second thing then is our voice AI product, right? So when somebody calls your business, instead of having someone on your team pick it up, you can actually pass that off to an AI agent, right? And they know things about your business. They can um, answer questions, they can fill out data, update your CRM, all this kind of stuff as well, right? So the two parts of it are the channels we focus on, SMS and voice, and then secondly, the ability to actually replace some of the work you're doing with those tools with an AI agent. So it's no longer just you have someone on your team using the tool, it's actually you have the tool doing things for you automatically.
Makes sense. So one of my first questions is, and very related to our topic, is at least indirectly so. You said you started the company about 5 years ago, right? This was early.
Yeah,
It was not like AI has not been around, but it's not been around to the extent that it is around today, or in the
exactly,
last 6 months or a year or two.
for
So I
sure.
presume I'm going to make some assumptions and correct me where I'm going to be completely creative here. Uh, you would have probably not used as much AI when you launched the company, I presume. Maybe you had products and features that were built. Maybe they used AI, maybe they did not, and things perhaps changed in the last 2 to 5 years. Is that true? If so, if
Yeah,
you could just walk us through your initial features, if if
great.
if it
Yeah,
happened without AI and with AI.
Yeah, no, great. That's a great question. So what became Whippy really started 3 years ago, but 5 years ago is when I started working with uh, David, my co-founder, right? So I worked with David at his previous company called Bloom Nation, which is like Shopify for florists, right? Um, I worked there for a little bit. You know, David actually left, and I left around the same time. And I was working at Shutterstock, the stock photography company, and
Right.
doing a master's here in Ireland. Um, and the week before COVID, the week before COVID, David had kind of come back from traveling and was like, "Hey, do you want to work together again?" Right? And I absolutely jumped at that opportunity. And like so many things are changed there, right? So it's like the start of COVID, and like we're not in any AI hype yet, right?
Right.
Um, so we actually started basically what was a consulting agency, right? So we were working with a bunch of different businesses, just implementing automations, writing custom software, all that kind of stuff, right? And while we were doing that, I actually still had my university email. And so I used that to email the CTO of OpenAI and was one of the first people to get access to pre-ChatGPT. So when they had, DaVinci and Babbage and these APIs before that were in hindsight seem so primitive, but were quite cool at the time, we got access to those early, right?
You
So we
sent
did
an
ship
email to Sam Altman, is what you're saying?
to Greg Brockman actually.
Okay.
I
Okay.
still
Go
actually
ahead.
still have the email. Still have the email. I said, "Hey, I'm a student at Trinity in Dublin. Like OpenAI is closed off. Like you can't just sign up for it. You couldn't sign up for it back then, right? But you could see the demos, right? They post a video on YouTube here or there and stuff like that. So emailed them, got access through my student email address. My student email address is still on our business account today. With all our other company stuff, which is funny. But yeah, that's how we originally got access. Again, pre ChatGPT, pre all these things. So that was one big moment. We were like very early on that side of it. And even before that, though, right? So we're building these automations. We're in the communication space. A lot of the stuff we're building is for, again, law firms, staffing agencies. They want to automate communication. So let me give you an example. It's like, hey, Krish, every week 500 people ask me when I'm going to get paid, right? If you're a staffing and recruiting agency, it's like surely somebody can just respond, hey, we pay on Friday, right? And if they speak Spanish, no, they speak Spanish and say it in Spanish or whatever it is, right? And so we built the first version of like a really basic frequently asked questions engine, right? And we used an open source Google model. We hosted on AWS. We fine tuned it a little bit. And all it would do was respond to frequently asked questions, right? If you sent, when do I get paid? Or you send something like, hey, what day is payday? It would understand the difference and fire off a response. That's it, right? That was step one. Step two, we saw kind of what OpenAI were coming out with. We got access to that pretty early. We were actually one of the first people to fine tune an OpenAI model. So we fine tuned a model to respond to Google reviews, right? So we sucked in a lot of our customers have Google My Business accounts. We sucked in all their past reviews and their responses and trained the model on spitting out a good response, right?
Mm.
Which at the time that was like a lot of work, right? To make it good for that use case, you had to put in a lot of effort, right? You had to pull the data, etc. Today, like you can kind of one shot that with ChatGPT. You can say, hey, here's our Google review, give me a good response, and it'll probably come up with something better than any human could, right?
Right.
But at the time, it wasn't that far along, and so it was all those little things kind of led up to, let's say, the ChatGPT moment, right? So how we got into the communications software space was through consulting, right? How we got into the AI space was, I guess, pure interest slash just listening to what our own customers wanted. And I think those two things coming together really are what like started the company, right? Really put us
Yep.
on that track.
That was very good. Thanks for sharing that with us, Jack. So the one of the first questions that comes to my mind when after hearing that is, uh, I've been building software for a long time. So there is a lot of unlearning and relearning to do. For some of us who've done this a while,
Yeah,
the folks who have not done it that long or getting started, so I would say it's a tad easier, if you will, because you don't have the unlearning part, you just have the learning part.
yeah,
And then, given that, here's my question. If you took a business problem 5 years ago, say the exact same business problem, let's presume that it was good 5 years back, and the problem is still valid today. The way as we would have approached the solving of that problem as a software company or as engineers, I have to believe it would be quite different, because the tools and technologies that were available to us 5 years earlier
Yeah.
are very different from what we have today. So given that, here's what I want to ask you. Uh, and maybe I'll say one more thing before I ask you the question, which is, given the, I don't want to say hype, because AI is genuinely helping people, and I've been going to some of these conferences where people are starting to talk about actual return on investment on their
Yeah.
AI spend, which was not the case even a year ago. So the value is starting to show already, if not for a while. Yet there are companies, at least that I've interacted with, that don't do a whole lot necessarily with AI, but have to either change their domain from .com to
Yeah.
.ai, and sort of sell themselves as an AI company. So what happens is, in my mind, you sometimes lose the forest for the tree, meaning you're more worried about the technology and how you're going to showcase yourself as a business using AI, that you've sort of lost sight of the core problem you're trying to solve. To me, it's a challenge. You want to use the latest and greatest technologies, absolutely. That
Yeah.
predates even AI. I mean, 10 years ago, even as a good engineer, you would have used the best framework or the library that you had access to, right, with the time and money and other constraints. So that hasn't necessarily changed. So how do you, first of all, if this does this make sense, and how do you separate that? Meaning, hey, I want to focus on the business problem more or equally, and I want to make sure I solve that with the current suite of AI technologies.
Yeah. Great. No, that's a really good question. And I think if you had asked me that question 3 or 2 years ago, my gut would have been to say, okay, Krish, it's like just focus on the product, make it really good, solve just the problem, like solve problems for people and like just focus on that, right? And that sentiment is 100%, I think, still valid. Like you actually have to solve real problems first, right? But what I would say at the same time is the consumer or people looking to buy today, they want to know what the AI element is. They understand it better than ever before, right? Like they use ChatGPT every day. They see value in that. They want whatever tool they bring into their business to have some AI portion to it, right? So you both have to use AI and you do have to market it, right? The AI domain, as bad as it, people just throwing it here and there, that's one part of it. I see the other side as well, which is like amazing software companies, but who haven't adapted their messaging and product to AI get left behind. And so you have to do both, right? You have to really, you know, start to solve problems for people. You have to, and maybe that's doing AI, using AI, maybe it's not. And then you have to tell people what you're doing, right? And show how you can save them money, save them time. And so, I think the second big part of it is like because of ChatGPT, right, or Claude or any of these models, right, people have a real tangible sense of what AI is. Whereas before, right, with let's say the move from like on-premise computing to the cloud, right, if you went to a executive at a company and said, move everything from your on-premise data center to the cloud, you'll save loads of money, but it's going to take you 5 years and all this kind of stuff. Like that's just going to go straight over their head,
Right.
right? They didn't care, but everyone was still going around saying I'm a cloud company, right? With AI, it's so different because it's in their pocket. You know what I mean? They're using it as their therapist. They're sending it photos of like, health questions, and it's like they can then extrapolate that from like, okay, everything that I buy, every process in my company could be improved by AI. Like they understand that, right? And so to go back to your original question, which is you have to provide value and then you have to explain it to people and show it to people because that is people are looking for that now, right? They're looking for the AI element.
Okay. Great answer. I'm going to ask the same question differently, many different ways, because it's not to
Yeah,
trick you, but just to
yeah,
get to the common denominator, the least
yeah,
common denominator. I'm going to take and I ask this very genuinely because we are an API company. We do other things, but API is one of the main things we do.
yeah,
And as we build our next API, our question is we know we have to be doing it differently from some of our prior APIs we've built over the years. But again, we want to use AI and the AI technologies where it makes the most sense, and not lose the forest for the tree, if you will, even if I'm repeating myself, where
Sure.
lose
Yeah.
sight of the core problem we are solving. And I've personally found that that is easier said than done sometimes, because as a developer, it doesn't matter if you're running the company or you're a developer. Ultimately you are, your role, your title, you can change, it doesn't mean anything, but at your heart you're somebody. At
Yeah.
my heart, I know I'm a developer. It doesn't matter
Sure.
whether I'm running a company or not. So when you look at these technologies, you get excited and you want to start consuming them. And sometimes you become you end up over engineering, if you will. Maybe it's the right
Sure.
word, maybe it's not. Over the years of the APIs we've built, Jack, we could have used a singular language for doing it.
Yeah.
We have it in 5 different languages, the most recent one being Golang, simply
Yeah.
because some of us like to write code in that language at that point of time. And now you become a polyglot shop almost unintentionally. And it's all
Sure.
right, but it's still sometimes maintenance is not as easy as it could have possibly been. So I always
Mm.
tell people, when you bring new technologies into the mix, make sure that there's no sense of redundancy, that there is going to be actual value over a reasonable period of time.
Yeah.
The reason I say all of that is coming back to the other facet of the same question I asked you earlier. Let's take Apple as a company. I know you mentioned you're an iPhone user, and are you on a MacBook as well?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so same here. Uh, I love Apple as a company. I mean, most of us do. But let's say when they had the conference last year, right, the WWDC, right, the main conference, there was a lot of chat about
Yeah.
AI, or Apple Intelligence as they call it, and everything that's going to happen. They created ads around AI and Siri, and I
Yeah.
think they've gone back. They pulled those ads out literally, because 12 months down the road, nothing's really actually happened, and we're all excited to see what's coming next month, possibly, right? The reason I give that background is Apple's a great company. They're typically at the forefront of technology. But now you see, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know how to say it. They are probably going to partner with Gemini, as what I understand. From a search AI/AI standpoint, and they seem to have dependencies. They have Chat GPT on the phone, like they don't have their own product. It's almost like Apple's outsourced their AI development as a software company, or probably the world's largest software company, to other companies. Meaning they have been behind, if you will, in terms of consuming, integrating, and leveraging AI technologies. And the way I see it is, one is, you could say, what, they messed up, right? They're
Yeah.
wrong. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, perhaps they are seeing something that other people are not seeing, which is, hey, AI is fundamental to how things are going to have to be in future, but it has to be meaningfully adding value into their features and services. If you're using Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, iMessage, which is in one of their most important products or features, it needs to make a seismic difference. But I have a question here amidst all of my rambles. I want to get your thoughts on, do you agree? I mean, what do you think about Apple in the context of AI? Are
No.
they lagging behind? Why have they not caught up? And what do you think about everything I've just said in the last 5 minutes?
Yeah. Good question. No, that's actually a great way of putting it. And I mean, that's a great example of, like, I guess somebody or a company doing some marketing and then not necessarily backing it up yet, right? Like, that's like actually the perfect example. I mean, what's interesting about Apple, right, is they're so big. They can attract any amount of talent, right? They have the they have this huge install base, right? They're vertically integrated, so they own the hardware and the software. And so one thing is, if there's any company to be behind, but with the ability to catch up almost instantly, it's them, right? And so to some degree, they have they're in a position where they can let everything play out, right? People might say they're behind, right? But from another sense, hey, they can let everything play out over the next 6 to 18 months, let's say. And as long as the product that they release at the end of the day is then valuable, everyone will use it, right? And like an example of that is, like, in Europe, like, they launched you know, contactless payments, right? Where you could tap your card and it would work, right? But, in America, you guys can swipe your debit card, swipe your credit card, and it's like, that's it, right? In Ireland, you used to have to put your card in, you have to put the PIN in, all this kind of stuff, right? And then they launched contactless payments, and it was amazing. And then Apple just came over the top of everyone and launched Apple Pay, right?
Right.
And so to some degree, if ChatGPT and all these AI products are the contactless payments of today, Apple can come out in 18 months' time and launch Apple Pay, right? Because I mean, they have access to all my data, all my messages, all my emails, the things on my hand the whole time. You know, it's in your ears right now. It's like it's everything. So, provided the final blow is up to par, I think that they still have a great chance of winning. You know?
I think you make a great point there. The point is, even if they were not the leaders in this scenario, given the 2 billion or 3 billion, I don't know how many ever iPhones and iPad devices that are out there, what you're saying, Jack, is they can do the catch up better than anybody else because the devices are in your hands. And if the AI feature came out 6 months later, yeah, it wasn't great, but it's all right. You know, we bought the iPhone 16s. It's not like we're not going to buy the 17 or the 18 or whatever the next version is going to be. So I see the way I take what you're saying is a very valid point. Is they have the luxury of not being leaders in what they do because they already have the pre-installed user base, so to speak. But not the rest of the world does not have that luxury, right? So you're going to have to be at the forefront of wanting to do it. Valid points. But second part of what I intended to ask there was the feature. Let's say in the last 1 year or even in the next 6 months to a year, is there something that you're expecting out of your iPhone or your iPad or your Apple devices, where given somebody who's aware of AI and is actually implementing and has a company that does AI, is there something that you expect for app? I'll tell you why I'm asking this question after your response. But is there a feature or two that you would like to see that Apple release on the devices?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many, but like the one that comes to mind for me is when I'm driving and I need to send a text message, Siri cannot understand like the context of what I'm telling it, right? If I say to Siri, "Oh, scratch that, rewrite the message and say this," right? It will literally write, scratch that, rewrite the message and say this as the text message, right? It's not conversational and contextually aware like ChatGPT is or Gemini or these other tools, right? And so I think making Siri contextually aware of what you're asking it to do is just a number one biggest win for them right now, right? Being able to control your iPhone with your voice, that should work, you know?
Which I think make good point because they one of the ads they pulled out was with Siri, I think if I remember correctly, where
Yeah,
it was able to remember what you had asked Siri previously. So there's context to a subsequent question, and they was able to tie things together and look up a calendar. Or I think the ad was like there's somebody who's, I think she runs into someone at the store or the restaurant. She doesn't know who that person is, and then I think Siri prompts or something along those lines, adding that particular value. So that's a
yeah.
good example. So they've had Siri forever for whatever whatever value it provided over the years. It's questionable, but that AI can actually help improve that. And then they have iMessaging and things of that nature. Let me take one other. I don't know if you use the image playground or the Gen emojis or all of those
Yeah.
features. I try to use them, just as they launched it. And then you recognize that, what, this is all right. But sometimes, it is one of those features that came across to me, and share your thoughts with me as well here, which was they needed to do something with AI. They were lagging
Yeah.
behind. And now let's push a feature. I have a question there, but do you agree with that? Jack, what's your take on that a
I
feature
mean,
like that?
I'll give you my conspiracy theory, right? So this is a pure conspiracy theory. So my theory is that they save products and features like that for when they have a 0-day vulnerability and they need everyone to update their iPhone. They save new emojis, they save gen emojis, whatever these things that capture a bit of imagination. They're getting released with a bunch of security updates. That's my hot take there. So do I think that's a valuable AI feature? Absolutely not. Do I think that's them trying to get into AI? No, I think it's just an Apple quirky product, and it's an incentive to download the latest version.
And I think it may not be an invalid theory because
Yeah,
Apple is not one of those companies that comes and concedes defeat with any of their failures. Most companies don't.
yeah,
There's a list of Amazon failures or Google failures. You can go to a page and sees everything that they
yeah,
tried and failed. As a small company, some of us don't have the luxury of failing that many times, but they do. But they don't come and accept it. Like with the Vision Pro, I don't know if it's a failure or not. I tried it. It
Yeah.
felt like I was a brick on my head for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't use this thing. The reason I want to chat about some of those things was just trying to see, just to as a segue to the next part of this conversation, which is, okay, now we recognize that there are things that can be done better, and we want to use AI to help us do it. But keep that in mind. Here's the second part of that question, if you will. When you have a fair bit of comfort with a set of tools and technologies, Jack, you now start thinking about ways to solving problems that you could not have solved without those technologies in the past, because you now sort of understand how these technologies work. That's one way to go about it. Get your understanding pretty good to a good point where you understand the technologies, and then you figure out, hey, what were the problems I was trying to solve in the first place? Can I use these technologies to solve that problem? Or you might be like, hey, I know what, now that I've learned these technologies, I can now solve problems that I had not thought of in the past. Completely a different set of problems that I never thought I could potentially solve. How do you approach that at Whippy? In other words, do you think of a feature for a customer or your end client saying, you know what, this is the problem that we want to solve, and then you go find out which AI tool or technology, or whether it's an LLM or SLM, doesn't matter. How do we solve this best using any technology, and does AI play a role there? That's one approach.
Yeah.
The second approach is, we have a problem, we want to solve this, but we are only looking at AI specific ways of solving this problem,
Got it.
meaning
Great
we are
question.
not interested in solving the problem any other way.
Yep.
Or the third approach is, the problem is dictated by the technology. In other words, we are not actually looking to solve a problem agnostic to the technology. We're actually going to learn the tools and the technologies that make the most sense to us and that those are futuristic. And now we're going to find out problems that can potentially be solved using those technologies, right? These are completely three different ways. There's probably more. At least I can think of three. Tell me if that makes sense, and how do you guys go about it?
Great question. And like for us, how we go about it is very simple. And the reason is because like we're a bootstrap software company. We didn't raise any money. We didn't raise any venture capital. I'm not trying to shove like AI into the problem. For me and for David and for our team, it's like, hey, what problems do our current customers have? How are they similar to other problems that potential customers have told us about? And can we go solve those problems, right? And sometimes we use AI, right? Sometimes AI unlocks the problem that we couldn't have solved before. But other times it's completely useless. It's I could be 1 minute, you know, talking to a customer about how some button is placed on the iPhone app and like how if this was two less taps, it would save them time, right? And then on the next call, like somebody would be like, my front desk coordinator didn't show up to work today, right? And now I'm gonna lose 10 grand. And you're like, okay, well they're different problems. One is I saved 2 seconds and I need to improve my UI. One is, okay, how do I actually replace an employee and can I use AI and all these other things, right? So you have to have a combination of both, right? I think if you're a solution in search of a problem or a tool in search of a problem, like you're not going to end up in the right place, right? You're not going to end up in a good situation.
So, which means, would it be the one in the middle then, like the approach where you know of a real problem you're trying to solve, but do you have a bias, for lack of a better word, towards AI, meaning I want to solve this problem, which is a real problem, but before I find the best way to doing it, I'm going to find the best AI way of solving that problem?
No, absolutely not. I think AI is second fiddle there. It's like what is the best way, right? Uh, and I think for us, or at least from my point of view, is it's that's actually a twofold question, right? One is, could you use AI to solve this problem or not, right? Could or should you use AI or not, right? That's one. And even if the answer is no, even if the answer is, hey, we're not going to use AI to solve this problem, the next question is, can you use AI in your business to accelerate the delivery of the solution, right? And so that's a separate thing. So let's say you mentioned earlier building API products, right? You know what I mean? Should you release your own version of some AI model custom for your customers? Maybe not. Like if all they need is a simple API that returns, I don't know, currencies, let's say, adding AI to that is not going to help, right? But if you internally, want to deliver that API quickly, should you use AI to speed up writing the code, to improve writing your docs, to translate your docs into 50 languages so now more people can use your API who couldn't before? Like that I think about a lot, right? So to answer your question, it's always problem first, and whatever is the best solution is the best solution. But now more and more, kind of as an aside, I'm always thinking, how can I use AI to accelerate the delivery of the solution, right?
That's actually a fantastic point. Let's dig deeper into that. So, what you're saying there is, just to rephrase that in my own words, even if the outcome, the end result is not conspicuously AI to the end user, be it a consumer, be it a large company, a client of some way, form, or shape, you're saying use if by virtue of using AI tools, you can solve your problems quicker, so you can reach to this end result, the solution faster, and serve a large group of your people, your consumers. That that is value add in itself, right? So the one is AI that's sort of quote unquote hidden, meaning you are using AI, but it's not just obvious to the end user. Let's take the other side of that. Let's say one of our products that we built, the first one, is a project management platform. Now, that was designed, built, implemented, and launched and deployed prior 5 years ago, right around the
Yeah.
time when you mentioned 2020. So it does not have much by way of UI, if anything at all. Now, by that, what I mean is, even from a UI UX standpoint, right, Jack? So basically, you go there, it solves a set of, we believe, unique project management related problems. There's a lot of platforms out there. They each have their own unique selling propositions. We believe ours has its own as well. But that being said, the user interface is rather traditional, like 99.99% of the websites have been over these years. If we were to design this UI today, the UI slash UX, I cannot envision that being anything like it actually is today. And let's take a simple example. A lot of the UI in future, to some extent or to a large extent, I believe is going to be conversational. And everybody's used to chat GPT and asking questions and getting responses. So a version of a UI, say you go to this place and a platform, and rather than adding content, like I can share mine, but you want to just imagine a bit. You're adding content, you're collaborating with other people, setting deadlines and due dates, and yada yada yada. Right? You can do a bunch of those things on our platform. But that's you initiating all of those actions. You go there, click the plus button, create content, add a deadline, and then it shows up on a dashboard, and so on and so forth. Simple example, if we were to redesign it today in the current world, for one, it's not going to look anything like it does.
Yeah.
Two, it's going to be like, hey, I have a podcast session with Jack on the 15th. Can you set this up? Add a due date, deadline, blah blah blah. I said something in 3 lines. It created all of this content that it needed to create, added it to my Google Calendar, and then on the iPhone app that we have, it sends a notification.
Yeah.
But my whole interaction was 180 degrees different, which means this is just the other side of the spectrum, where it's not hidden. AI is not hidden. Here, you're actually making it quite obvious to the user. Now, one could argue that you
Yeah.
can sort of mimic that and do that perhaps without AI, but maybe not.
Yeah.
I just want to get your thoughts on the other side of exposing this and making it very obvious to the end user that we are actually using AI.
Yeah. Good question. Like, so I think that's a tough one, and that's actually something I think about a lot, right? Because we use AI in our product, and some of our product is AI. Like you talk to an AI on the phone, you're communicating with an AI, all these kind of things. But still, at the crux of it, a a good chunk of our product is still what you would call like traditional software platform, right? There's still a user interface with buttons and filtering and all that kind of stuff, right? And so would I design some elements of it differently today if, with the pure chat interface? Maybe. But I still think you need, at least today, you need a proper software interface as well, right? And so I think there are a lot of companies, Notion, Canva, these companies who are layering these chat interfaces on top of their traditional platform, right? And I think while the intent is good, and while the idea, like if this worked, it would be great, I think that's something you can still only add in after you have a software platform. Like when I type into Canva, make me a business card, right? And the AI generates it for me, and I use a chat interface, right? The first thing I want to do is then go to the normal Canva editor and edit it, right? And so adding those UI, companies starting with the UI only from the AI UI only, they have to back into a normal software interface at some point, I think, right? To the editing, to whatever it might be, project management, etc. Right? Zapier, like the automation tool, another great example, right? It's like you can type, "Hey, connect this app to that app," but then pretty quickly you want to go tweak things, right? And so to throw the question back at you, if you were starting again today, would you start with the chat interface and then go build the traditional software interface? Or would you still start with the traditional software interface, but know you were going to layer on a chat interface? You know what I
No,
mean?
I would actually, I have no doubts about that. I would actually
Really?
start with a very different interface, because here's my thing here,
Yeah.
right? Uh, there's two parts to this. Let's see, maybe more than two. As more and more people use Chat GPT, right? And I think there was recent. I
Yeah.
think one of the vice presidents of Apple was in DC at one of those conferences or meetings or sessions in Congress, if I remember correctly. And he had made a mention about the usage of Google search being diminished on the
Mm.
iPhones. Google dropped 8% that day. Literally. That's the power of these big people making statements, and
Yeah. Yeah.
the market reacts just about immediately. Now, let's take somebody like me. I use what makes the most sense to me. The only time I see myself drinking the Kool-Aid is when Apple sells a product. Every other time, or when maybe DiCaprio has a release, I'm going to watch it regardless. But every other time, there's some sense of rationality. I think it prevails. So I use search Google all the time. I used it today. I asked my wife last night. Google's you know as a digression, sorry, Jack. One of the
Yeah.
things we do at the company here is investing and trading.
Yeah.
We are bootstrapped as well, so I can totally relate to the challenges of bootstrapping and the passion that one needs to actually get things working. So we do many things to keep our lights on, even unrelated things. Investment and trading are one of those,
Yeah.
two of those things. So it has helped us keep in touch with the market. It's kind of funny, when we started doing it, we thought, what, it's only to make money. Then we realized it also teaches us constantly as to what's happening out there in the real world, which as a developer or as somebody who's running a startup, I was never privy to necessarily. You read a few articles here and there, and that's about it. But actually doing this trading and investing has had a profound impact on how I actually look at things. The reason I give that example is, now I said Google search not being used as much on the iPhones, but I still use it every day. Some people just use Chat GPT. I'm still not caught up with it. Maybe I'm not the biggest fan of that type of an interface, but maybe it's like beer or something where I have to develop a taste to it. The reason I mention all of this as a long-winded answer is, part of it is how you want to solve the problem that you think is best, because that's the only way you can continue solving the problem. Enjoying what you do. But at the same time, what's the point in solving a problem in vacuum if nobody's going to use it,
100%.
right? And if more people are getting used to these interfaces with Gemini and Chat GPT, then I feel like slowly but surely, the way their expectations as end users, as consumers or end users of using a product, is going to be very aligned with those tools as well. When I'm using Chat GPT and I'm switching context to a Snowpal product, and it feels very, very different from Chat GPT,
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, what, I have a learning curve where maybe I'm not interested in that learning curve. And if there happens to be a different project management UI that starts out asking, hey, Krish, what do you have to solve today, right? And let's say I write a blog. I have to build these things this week, features, I'm working on some API, I have to go to a conference, I have to do these 17 different things. and I don't have it organized by way of thoughts. So I'm just going to write a piece of text into it. Now that uses AI and LLMs and the best models available to do whatever it can, and it creates all of this content behind the scenes. So I don't have to go to 17 different places. I don't have to click like 16 different buttons, and I don't have to maneuver, navigate through pages.
True.
It depends, but I might argue that that bodes for a slightly better user experience, because it actually saved me a ton of time. Now that if I were going to spend 30 minutes doing all of this, my session time is reduced. I only spend 3 minutes doing that, and I have the 25 minutes left to go, right? Doing something else productively. And the system also enjoys it by way of throughput and scalability in terms of performance and scalability, right? Because if I have the user being able to do something in 3 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes, then I have to worry a little bit lesser, I hope, about scalability than I might have done previously, because now my active users at any given point of time are a whole lot lesser. Unless you're a system like TikTok or Instagram, who typically only benefits by keeping you as long as they can on the platform. A
Yeah.
lot of the other places, you're trying to add value and then say, Jack, go about your life. Don't spend more time on this platform than you need to. How do you arrive at that happy medium where it's not a traditional user interface? Again,
Yeah.
it's not something you have to dramatically relearn, but it may be somewhere in between.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, I mean, just there's a couple of interesting things in what you just said there, right? So, first off, I definitely agree with you. If you could do that, that would be a better user experience, right? I think if you could chatify everything and make it reliable, that's amazing. I think we're, from building like AI products every single day, it's like, while they're amazing and blow my mind, I think getting to that point is going to take a bit longer. I'm sorry, by a bit longer, I could be a year, right? But I feel like we're not there today, right? So would I start building? I still think you're taking a big risk if you were to restart your company today, uh, going full chat only, right? Because the risk you're taking is that this goes back to your original question, right? Which is, do you build with, like, is AI you're going all in on building with AI, right? Or AI building is the product, right? To some degree. And it's like, if you're wrong there and things don't, the models don't continue to accelerate at some massive rate, you'll always just be that 1% off, right? But in software, like, you can't have a 1% error rate. You know what I mean? Like, if you're building a project management tool, you can't have 1% of all projects not be created, or be, whatever it is, right? So that's one thing I'd be a little bit concerned about. The second thing then is on the performance aspect, right? If you if you're like, hey, instead of a customer spending 30 minutes my app, they're spending 3, right? The work is still getting done in the background, right? And so, what will drive more usage? Is it the 10 clicks from the user, or the 150 queries that the AI model has you fire off to 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 generate, and then you have to log all those queries and all these sorts of things, right? LLM calls and conversation context for the LLM calls and all these things, right? So I think to some degree, potentially your data storage even grows more, right? Because now you're no longer having the user make clicks and save the action. You're having something generate what it should do and then take the action, right? So, sorry, I think to go back to your question, I think some products would highly benefit from that chat first approach, and you have to back yourself if you're going to start like that today, right? And second of all, I think it does bring in a whole new set of problems when you go that way. And so it's, as an engineer though, all the same things still matter: database performance, rate limiting, what's going to happen when your API calls fail, or when you have to have logging and all these things, right? Those problems are still the same.
Jack, you make many amazing points there. One thing that definitely piques my interest there. I want to call out for it again is you're saying, hey, you go all out with this chat interface because everyone is in this world of NVIDIA and AI and everybody's buying these GPUs and things
Yeah.
are changing, things are moving fast. And I always go back to examples where I was at a nursery buying some plants. It's almost summertime here, right? And I've been going to the same place for many years, and I've seen that their tool has not changed at all. And I mentioned that
Mm.
in I think one of my previous podcasts where I feel like it was built 10 years ago by people who use technologies from 20 years
Yeah.
before, right? So
Yeah.
it looked very dated.
Yeah.
So I talked to people who are using it, the next generations of employees who work there. They were like, yep, we would really love for this to be different. But
Yeah.
yet I see companies, they're a private company, but they have sizable revenue. Not everybody's going to go all out and change everything that they're doing, not overnight, because you have to figure out what value does it bring me. Now, if I'm a nursery selling plants, if I'm able to do things fairly quickly using this tool from 10 years ago, then I do not need this new version of a system that looks pretty jazzy and cool and has all of this stuff, but yet it's selling plants to a group of people and so on. So from a consumption standpoint, Jack, what are your thoughts? Like when companies want to rebuild it,
Mm.
do you think how should they make this judgment? Let me add a second part of that question as well, even though it may not be directly related, just so I don't forget it. Uh,
Yeah.
the second part of the question is a lot of the tools today. Let's say if we take our UI and let's say we use a chat interface to add and bring AI into the mix. We've kind of refrained from doing that for multiple reasons. Time, money is always one reason as a startup, but outside of that, I do you when you go to use some of these tools that were built prior to these AI days, and now they're trying to integrate AI just to make that impression.
Yeah.
The UI actually becomes worse. It does not get better because
True.
the original design was not built with this in mind. Now you're
Yeah.
like fitting a square peg in a round hole, if you will.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of things happening, and I'm like, you know what? I was happier with the non AI interfaces, if you will, because either you drop the ball and just rebuild it from ground up,
Yeah.
or think a lot more about what that integration looks like. But a lot of the places I've seen that even with Canva, because you mentioned that, I mean, I love Canva as a product, and I actually like the story of the founder a whole lot more than the product in itself, which is why I've started using the product more than I sometimes even need.
Yeah.
Of her having to come from Australia to ask for money like 100 times in the Bay Area or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, there are I'm trying to think if I'm doing things any differently on Canva given their integration with
Yeah.
AI. Maybe not, because I try to have ask questions and have it create something for me, and I ended up actually redoing quite a bit of that
Yeah.
almost every
Exactly.
single time. And I'm
Exactly.
like, you know what, I would rather go to my previous examples and start with them as a template or a foundation, because that's along the lines of what I
Exactly.
do need. I don't want you to tell me, because I think the tool was going into the larger world in terms of LLMs and data
Yeah.
models and figuring out the answers to my question. Whereas I was looking for the answer to my question in the context of content that I had previously created, right? More from if it's RAG or retrieval augmented generation, whatever it is that they're using. I only wanted that question to be answered with my prior content, not with everyone else's content out there. And it was not doing that. And it fell flat and it was not
Exactly.
helping
Okay.
me, right?
I think we're on the same page. So like I'm gonna break it. I'm gonna put it into three groups, right? So we're gonna put group one is traditional software UI, right? Group two is the new chat interface, right? And I'm gonna call group three no UI at all, right? So no UI software, right? And I would say there's loads of problems where a chat UI is great and all the things we talked about are great. But I still think, you know, a problem is still best solved with the traditional software UI, right? Or no UI at all, right? And so actually I think maybe to put it in a different way is like if you are building a company today, a software product today, how would you build it so you have no users at all? Not that how do you build it so that it's easier for your users to use, but how do you have no users at all? And so what do I mean by that? Which is like, let's take Ring Central, right? So Ring Central, the phone system, right?
Right.
You have a phone system on one end. If you put a chat UI on top of that, like that's not really that helpful, right? But what if you build a full phone system where all your employees were just AI agents talking on the phone, answering all your questions? You never logged in, you never picked up the phone because it just handled everything, right? I know that sounds like to one extreme end, but I actually think that's a better, more interesting thought exercise of like if I was building a product, less about what chat interface do I put on it and more about how could I solve the problem completely so that no one needs to use my software at all, right? Like to give another example is like with you know, is do we want a tool where you can type build me a marketing email and change the color to blue, or do we just want a tool where it just it just does it all for you? You know what I mean? No prompting. I think that would be. I think that's. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going here, but like I think that's the more
No,
interesting
that's
thought
actually a
exercise. Then yeah,
Jack, that sorry to interrupt you, but that is a phenomenal point you mentioned that because one of my recent guests, actually, I forget his name, my apologies, on the podcast, he had meant that's what his company actually does. So
yeah,
they call it smart websites. And the conversation we had in that podcast, to jog my memory, was around AI agents and how when you're building these sites in future, you're not necessarily building it for humans, not entirely for humans. You're
yeah,
building them for other agents to consume, right? So we were talking a little bit about agent to agent interaction. So I think what you're telling me sounds a bit like that, which is I'm building the Snowpal interface and it's not even meant to be used by Jack as a human. It's meant to be used by Jack's AI agent. So my interface, if there is even one such thing, has to be more machine friendly than human friendly.
100%.
But the point was that probably is down the road, or even down the road, it's going to be a combination of humans and machines interacting with software. So you're going to have to come up with these new sets of user interfaces that are neither directly addressed towards humans, like Homo sapiens, or towards bots, but you're going to have to do a combination of those two things, whatever that means. Right? And I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And like, I'll give you something that this is a real product that we've built, and I tell you why I think it's very valuable today, right? Which is, um, part of our product is you can communicate across email, SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, phone call, right? All these different things, right? To build that today as a developer, you have to build and maintain multiple integrations, right? You have to build an SMS integration, then you have to go connect to WhatsApp, to Instagram, to email. Maybe there's 5 email providers, and you use multiple. Same with SMS, all this kind of stuff, right? And so what we've effectively done is wrapped a bunch of APIs to have an omni-channel communication interface. Hey, send this message, just a phone number and some text, and it will get delivered on WhatsApp or SMS or send it as an email, right? And so for an AI agent that wants to communicate, that API of one API, any channel, is going to be much easier for the agent to understand than it would be if the agent had to maintain 20, right? And so I think that's another really good point that you're making, which is like, as you're building products, you have an extra customer as well, which is, can you build it for AI to use, right? And the answer is yes, 100%. Like, you even see like so many people that come in inbound to us say they found us on ChatGPT, right? And so to some degree, your product has to be friendly for AI agents to use, and then you actually have to go market your product to AI. You know what I mean?
Correct.
You have to
Right.
write your website content so that AI picks it up, that AI recommends Snowpal's API as the API to use. And so, and then when that person goes to like, you know, throw your docs into Cursor, they have to be friendly to use, right? To build the integration. Like, real example from the other day, a pharmacist, technical guy, right? He writes his own code, but he runs a compound pharmacy. And he said, hey, is there any way to download our docs into one file so that he can give it to AI to help him use our API? And so I showed him how to point the docs just to the Open API spec, right? And because even we have these beautiful docs for humans to read, right? But ultimately, it's all generated off just one big JSON file. And I said to him, here, take this link, give it to your AI, and it just told him exactly how to use the docs, exactly what he needed to do, right? Hey, I want to send an SMS at this time. Okay, Whippy's API has scheduled messaging, and it wrote the code for him, right? And so I think we're already there, right? We're already at that point where you need to be thinking about and building products for AI to use with humans, you know?
You know, great points. I know we are at the 1 hour. I have a few more things to ask you. How
For
does your
sure.
time look? Do you have a bit more time?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, and just anytime you want to wrap up, because every conversation with a dev engineer is interesting to me, Jack. So it's,
Yeah.
and I work from home and I'm chatty, as you can probably tell. So just whenever you want to wrap up, just say, give me five, and then we can wrap it up. The
Perfect.
thing I want to ask you is, we talked about unique selling propositions. I want to come to the development side of things very quickly, but before that, we talked about USP and asked about the USP of your product at the top of this call. But here, what I want to ask you now is, as more companies start using such automation related tools, right, AI and beyond, when I go to a place and it takes you maybe because you're a developer, maybe you're not, or whatever, it takes me like 3 seconds to tell if I'm interacting with a system that has got any human element to it, or it's a lot of machines that I have to wade through. And a lot of times I find quick shortcuts to get to the human
Yeah,
before
sure.
so I can get past these bots, because I know they're going to ask me these standard questions. Like, I was interacting with a tool the other day and I knew it was going to ask these combinations of questions, and 9 out of 10 times it never ever got anywhere closer to where I wanted for it to be. It was almost like they needed those questions answered so the company can channel the questions to the right departments. It was not to help the user experience
Correct.
for me as a consumer. It
Correct.
was to help their supply chain ish process internally. To me, that didn't bode for great user experience. And I was like, you know what? If there's another company that didn't do any of this, and I was able to get to a human right away through chat or phone or whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, I would actually be a bit more loyal to them than to this company. So, which is a bit counterintuitive because we're talking AI and improving user experience in the context of using these tools.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, this is not a contrived example, I promise. It's actually a genuine example.
Yeah.
So, do companies also have to worry about keeping the human aspect of things so people don't switch out because you're too automated and you're too bot oriented that it is actually not making for great experience?
Yeah. No, great question. So I think the first thing that I say to everyone is when you choose to use AI in your business, especially for uh, consumer, customer, or person facing scenario, right? You have to make sure the incentives are aligned. So, what I mean by that is like if I'm looking for a job, right, and you're a staffing agency, and as a job seeker, traditionally, people don't follow up with me, they never respond, or they get back to me in 24, 48, or a week later. If AI can follow up with me and answer my questions and interview me and do all these things, but do it instantly, like that's a better experience, right? But if I want a restaurant reservation and I can wait on hold for 20 minutes, or the AI can take my reservation, I'm willing to go through the AI, right? So I think picking when to use AI, is first super important, right? Because you're right. Like in that scenario, let's say you're calling because you're calling to complain, right? Because hey, something's broken or whatever it is. You're already annoyed at the company, right? So you're showing up annoyed, and now they're putting an AI in front of you. Like maybe and the AI can't solve your problem. It's like then that's a really bad user experience, right? So you know, and it could be, and so rearranging those incentives to use AI when it makes sense is probably a big factor in it. And then the second of it is like, I think these systems are going to get better and people are going to be trained to interact with them more. And so as they get better and younger generations of people are used to interacting with them, I do think to some degree that problem goes away, like the same way when phone first came out, people were like, I'm never getting a phone. When email first came out, I'm always going to write letters. It's like the next generation of people are going to be used to talking to AI on the phone, to chatting with their interfaces, or to whatever it is. And I think to some degree, time will solve those things. But like the human element, it is important, right? But I think in that example you gave, it's going to go away, right? Where the human element will come in will be in those scenarios where it really does matter, like whether it's selling or upselling, or if it's just an artisan niche product, and it's like that's your unique selling point for sure. There's still a big part of it there, but I kind of got off topic there, but it's like it's
No, I think I get your point. What
yeah,
you're saying is, we learn and adapt as humans, as
yeah,
people. So what you're saying there, Jack, is it makes sense. You're saying, the next generation of people, a child that is born today does not know any other way, right?
yeah,
It's gone that child, as it becomes a kid, a toddler, and a teenager and an adult, is only exposed to AI agents being able to answer questions, to the point that the child does not even know that there was a time and period of, there was a phase of life in this world where humans actually picked up the phone to answer questions. So
yeah,
the rest of us, some of us are in transition. So we have to sort of adapt to what we liked and what we don't like. And you may or may not be left with choice. But for people who are coming into existence, it could be an entirely different experience. So which also means when you're building software, you're cognizant of your user base, but you're also cognizant of the culture that's associated with that user base, right? So my next question is relates to sort of culture and experiences. Now, I don't travel a whole lot, I'm not a big traveler, but I've done some travels. uh, and if you've done a fair bit of travel, Jack, you know that things are very different in different parts of the world. Every
for sure.
continent has its own culture. And if you took some countries like India, every state has its own culture. It's almost like Europe in a nation, where different languages, different food, and whatnot. And when we talk solutions, software solutions, to people, we sort of homogenize it, meaning saying everyone's going to want something like this. That may or may not be true, right? How I don't know. I've talked to people like who build software in the Middle East, like in Saudi and other places. The
Yeah,
whole approach to building software, as I don't know much about it because I've not lived there or built software there, but it comes across to me as it being quite different, right? I've lived most of my life here in the US. I know how we build software in the US and work with folks like in Europe and in Asia. I want to get your thoughts on how does this impact software development per se, right? We've talked about consumption, end users, and clients and whatnot. I want to be a bit more selfish and shift gears to us as people internally in the team. How do you think the culture, both technically and non-technically, of an organization or software company, how much does it have to change? Is it a little bit? Is it seismically? Or is it 180 degrees where, you know what, we all build software a certain way in 2022, 2023. We cannot afford to do it anywhere close to that today. Where do you stand and what is your take on this?
yeah. So yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, like when I studied mechanical engineering, manufacturing engineering, right? And like what I loved about that was like building and operating in the real world, physical things, going into a machine shop, going to a construction site, going to a factory, right? But the biggest problem was, or the biggest challenge there is just, or the thing I disliked the most was how slow things moved, right? If you wanted to launch and design a new part, you know, getting something shipped in a year was like amazing, right? That's amazing. And what attracted me to software was like if you have an idea, you can ship it in an hour, in a day, or less, right? And so I think with that in mind, like all these tools that are coming online now, I see them as a vector to go even quicker, right? And so I've always been, since I started using software and developer tools, I do spend time to learn as much as them as possible. And like I think we talked about this at the very beginning. Like you could go down the hole of learning a language or testing a language, and then you have 5 languages, and obviously that's a problem. But I think at the same time, just using one tool because that's what you've always used is also a big problem.
It's horrible. It's a bigger problem, right? Yeah,
It's a
it's a
bigger
bigger
problem. I'm
problem.
glad you said
Yes.
that. It's 100%. It's a bigger problem. And so my approach today is, without causing a distraction, to constantly layer in small tests, right? And so we're a team of, let's say, 20 engineers. I might try a tool and decide, for everybody, we're not using this. It's not good, right? I might try a tool and be like, hey, I think this is good. I'm going to give it to one more person, two more people. Hey, can you guys try this on the side, right? And then if it's good, we'll get everyone to do it, right? And if it's really good, I'll say, everyone is doing this. There's no choice, right? And so, like, a real world example of that is we started using like an AI code reviewer, right? Where the AI would look at our pull requests and it would suggest, hey, this is a potential bug. Hey, how you can improve this. But it was a recommendation from another developer, right? And I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to try it. I just tried it on my pull requests for like a week. And then I was like, okay, it's good. I'm going to try it on everyone who's works on the front end, right? Then I'm going to try everyone who works on the back end. And then I'm like, okay, well, there's 5 of these products in the market. I'm going to have all of them do it, right? And we're going to pick the best one. And now we've landed on one, and it's like every pull request basically is reviewed by AI now. And it's amazing, right? And so, like, that part of it is, I think you have to always have your eye open. I think you have to always be looking, how can you accelerate? And then you have to test things and double down when they work and rip them back out when they don't, right? And that's kind of my process for bringing in new things, and like always with the eye to go, how do we go quicker?
Okay, great example. You mentioned the case with code reviews, but outside of code reviews, Jack, would you approach, like, let's say again, going back to a problem 3 years ago, the same problem today, do you think the development process, the SDLC, has to be very, very different from how it was earlier? Or do you think not all facets of the SDLC have to
Oh,
change?
yeah, good. No, good, good question. I think the core building blocks, or like core ideas, are the same. Like um, for me, the core, like, it kind of depends what you think are the software development process. But for me, it's really simple. It's this. It's plan and organize your work, right? It's push code often, and it's ask for help and feedback, right? And for me, it's those 3 things, because, like, it's easy to write code, but it's like hard to understand the domain, the edge cases, all these things. And you have to, like, I swear to God, I spend more time thinking about what I'm going to do than actually writing code, right? And and then once I get there, it's like, okay, I want to push small changes iteratively so I can have other people look at it, so I can share my progress with people, so I can potentially even get it into users' hands before it's finished, right? And so I'm constantly making small changes instead of waiting, a month, a week, a year, whatever it might be, God forbid, to launch something. And then when I get stuck, like, I have the humility to ask the person beside me, hey, can you help me? Here's all the changes. Here's my plan. And, like, for me, that's what software development is, right? It's just like, can you do those 3 things quickly? And I think with AI, that doesn't go away, right? Like, you still need to plan, or you need to give AI your plan, right? You still want to break things down into small chunks, right? Have you ever, if you've ever had a long conversation with any of these AI tools, like, they go off the rails, right? The longer it gets,
Right.
you got to keep things small. And then you also have to realize that, hey, sometimes you need someone else to look at it. You need feedback, whether that's AI feedback or human feedback, right? Because you're going to get stuck. And so, no, nothing about the software development process changes with AI, right? It just augments it or enhances it in certain ways.
Yeah, I'm going to call out for this for people who are watching and listening. And everything that Jack said between an hour, 8 minutes into the podcast and an hour, 13 minutes, or give or take those 4 minutes, they are incredibly important, because everything that you said there, Jack, is the if you ask me, it's a great way to build software. In other words, you never used a technical term there in those 3 or 4 minutes, and you never called out for a particular technology. You didn't even mention AI, but everything that you said is required to build great software, which is, you mentioned iterative development, right? Don't keep building forever before you figure out how things go. You also said you think through quite a bit before you start writing code. I've been guilty of doing it the other way many a times. You start writing code because you're a developer, And then 2 hours later, you're like, you know what? It's not a question of whether this code is good, bad, or ugly. The problem is this code shouldn't even exist, right? Why did I start writing this 2 hours ago? So everything that you mentioned there makes complete sense. And I want to make a point here, which is, if you took the Cunningham and Ritchie's book, one of the first books I had read, back in college.
Yeah.
Sadly, those people are not with us anymore. But good engineers, and AI or technology in general, to me, they're mutually exclusive terms. In other words, you can be a good engineer with or without great technologies. You could be a not so great engineer even with the best of technologies, right? Which is always true. In other words, the tool is only as good as the person using that tool, which
Yeah.
which is undeniable in the world of AI or non-AI as well. So it's very important for people to recognize that. Make sure you understand the problem well enough, make sure that that is a problem that needs to be solved, and that the problem has not been solved already by like 10 other people better than how you're imagining for it to be solved. Because again, one more time, of all the things we have done, a lot of things have gone to production, most of it I should say, but the things that have not is because, Jack, we built stuff because we thought it was a great idea, and then we recognize that maybe we liked it more than other people may have liked it, or maybe someone else solved the problem better, right? I mean, no tool is going to help you there. You're at the mercy of your own intellect to helping you guide in those processes. But the reason I asked the question about the SDLC and AI is, here's let me rephrase that question. uh, your approach perfectly fine, makes sense, no
Yeah.
different from what I'm going to say here. It's just a slightly different kind of example. I think about a feature. We create a ticket, we create that on GitHub projects, or on our own platform, doesn't matter. We jot it down informally. We don't spend more than like 45 seconds in writing that ticket. It's not a government project, so it's not section 1.3.7.4, right? It's just a
Yeah.
startup. You want to get that idea across to the other parties, so you stick it on in a ticket. And then you write it down. You have a quick call, maybe with the team members, talk about how you're going to solve that problem. Maybe then increase the size of the ticket, meaning just add a bit more details where you possibly can. Bring, if it's a end-to-end full stack implementation, meaning UI and API, then you bring more people, two people into the call. Otherwise, just the API team or the UI team. Talk about which tool or technology you want to use. See if there's an existing example already in our suite of repos that we can piggyback on, or if we should be doing something differently. And if there's a UI component to it, you bring the UI UX people, or you might be the same person doing it. And then you start building it iteratively, deploying it, lower environments and whatnot, and then pushing it to production, right? Just I'm trying to trivialize some of these parts. Now with AI in the mix, we find ourselves in a position where we are like, which of this needs to have closer interaction with AI? In other words, the first time when we wrote the ticket, should we be writing the ticket the same way we've done in the past? Or should we use a tool that creates a ticket? And
Yeah.
should it create the ticket and do some of the work that we typically do after that, to figuring out whether there's UI, whether there's API, how many, who are the stakeholders, who should be engaged, whether email should be sent out to them or a Slack message sent to them. All of this can, potentially change. It does not have
Yeah.
to on day one, but I'm just curious to know your thoughts on, if you had all the time and money, would all of this change?
Yeah. I mean, if you could, like even for us, like this is all real world today. It's like we have AI record and transcribe every single call at our company, internal and external, every single call. And that was actually one of the first things I forced us to do when it was just me and David. There was two of us at the company. I forced us to record and transcribe every single call, right? And so like that's one part of it. You're jumping on calls with your team members. Okay, that's context for the issue or the ticket. You wrote a little bit at the start. That's context for the ticket or the issue. But you also have your whole code base. And so what you write or what you talk about then is referencing things that are in your code base, right? And so that can be surfaced in. And so like I think that sure, that part of the process or like the tools available today with some tweaks can like massively improve that specific part of the process, right? It's like so much of or sometimes I will see so much knowledge is in people's head, like this one engineer did this one thing, right? And people don't know about it because there's a million lines of code or whatever. And so not everyone, you can't hold the whole thing in your head at all the time, but like AI can, you know? And so, I think that it does become an extra tool in that part of the process of it can remind you, hey, if you change this thing, it's going to impact this part of the code base, or hey, these 4 tickets in the past references that. And like, I see that happening today. I think it'll become a more and more part of the process, right? Um,
Yep,
I think
makes
that's just
sense.
low hanging fruit. It makes sense. Exactly. I think we all agree that'll happen.
I've come to the last two questions I have for you, and then I'll give you the time to ask me
Yeah.
questions as well. Are you able to share some of your tech stack to the extent possible with our audience so
Yeah.
they know these are the things that they could potentially be using or learning? Because most
Yeah.
of our audience is developers as well. Yeah.
For sure. So on the front end, we use TypeScript, React, and React Native, right? On the back end, we use Elixir, right?
Okay.
And we have a Postgres database, and we use OpenSearch as well, and that's it.
Okay. And what about your AI integration? Like, what are the AI tools that you use here?
So we do use some Python for some parts of the AI, right, product. And so like when it comes to that, you can do a lot in Elixir, right? And then obviously we call out to some external services. We can actually host some of our own models. We use all the large APIs, Gemini, OpenAI, Claude. We use them all as well, and we have layers in front of them and a bunch of open source tools. We use open source models. We fine tune our own. Um, but ultimately, like at the highest level, like our stack is super simple, right? Um,
And
it's
it's very
Elixir.
complex, just like I think to quote Albert Einstein, I believe,
Yeah,
is it's very complex to make things simple, right? It's
yeah,
important to keep things simple because you're focused on the problem. It's very easy to make things complicated because sometimes you're subject to a repo that looks extraordinarily complex, and then you figure what is it trying to do, and it's like, okay, it's creating a to-do app or something. You know what I mean? I'm just giving a
yeah,
preposterous example. So I think it's important. But are you guys like, where is your deployment? Are you on AWS? Do you use like AWS or Google? What do you use from a cloud standpoint?
yeah. We use AWS, so we pretty much have everything deployed on AWS. We use a pass called render as well for some things, um, but mostly on AWS. Again, pretty simple. Our debt at the beginning of the company, I did actually put a good bit of work into our CI/CD or dev setup. So every pull request that you open spins up its own preview environment, its own front end, its own back end, its own database. That database is seeded, and so everyone can work independently. We're, our engineering team is remote and fully distributed. So we have people in Los Angeles and people in Pakistan, in Bulgaria, in Ireland, in London, in Brazil, all over the world,
You know,
right?
that was going to be my next question, but I let you
Yeah.
finish this. My next question was literally going to be that, but please
Yeah.
continue.
Okay, so we're all over the world, right? Um, and in order to be able to work all over the world, you have to have a great engineering setup, in my opinion, right? And so we put a lot of work into that. Everyone can work and independently if they need to. Your code is not blocking my code from doing X, Y, Z, right? And it's all set up to be like that. And that it all ties back to those three things I said earlier, right? Which is planning, pushing code often, and asking for help and feedback. If I can't read your plan and you're in Los Angeles and I'm in Dublin and there's an 8 hour time difference, right? If you get stuck on something and you need me to help, and then you go to sleep and I wake up and I can't see your plan, I can't see your code, like I can't help you, right?
Right.
And so all of those things add up to being able to work with a remote team, and that's why we are able to do it, I think, right? And so like we hire people from all over the world, and I don't believe in um I don't believe in like I love going to an office. I go to an office every day, right? But I don't believe in, hey, that's the only way, or I don't believe in, hey, we have to have pods of people in like these 3 locations. I will hire anyone as long as they're, they have a desire to work with us, that they're, you know high energy, that they want to move quick, and that they're willing to follow that process, right? Because as soon as one person doesn't row in there, it breaks down for everybody, right? I can't help you, you can't help me, I don't know what you're working on, etc. So Yeah, that's kind of like my philosophy of the
And
team.
all
And
of that, just to reiterate, all of that is valid today. All
yeah,
of what you said is going to be valid 5 years later. And all of what you said was valid 20 years ago. In other words, when I started my first job. And what I mean by that, Jack, is good engineering doesn't change as fast as technologies, right? It
100%.
changes very slowly. If your fundamentals are good and solid to a large extent, learning a technology, yeah, sure, some could have a higher, steeper learning curve than some others, but you can still, back yourself to doing that. The moment you're engineering or whatever skills you need to for whatever you're trying to get done, they are not as good as they need to be, then the tool becomes more important than the person using it, and which is never good. So you mentioned a remote team. It's funny, we should talk about that after AWS, because it's one of the companies that actually, for whatever reason, that skips, I'm baffled personally. I did a podcast entirely on that, talking about how long it'll take me to go to the AWS office in this area, and whether it's actually worth it, even though Amazon believes that it is worth. So I'm in the same team as you
Yeah.
in terms of thinking remote work is here to stay, for at least for the most part. But the question I want to ask you, the last question is, building software in the US over the years, we've looked for help outside the country for one of many reasons. There's not a singular reason, but even if it's my own opinion, the primary reason, I should say, is because it's expensive to build software in the US. Now, building it in Seattle or the Bay Area is more expensive than building it in Kansas City. So there are differences. But someone showed me the map yesterday with a different guest with the actual salaries and whatnot, and I think Kansas was along the lines of what people were getting paid in London,
Yeah.
which was surprising to me because I would have thought it was more, but it was at least in that particular example. The East Coast, Boston's expensive, New York is expensive, DC is not that much cheaper, maybe relatively, but not a whole lot different. So there are differences, but generally it's reasonably expensive, I think, to build software. Now, that was one of the reasons it was outsourced to different parts of the world, wherever it was being outsourced to. My question to you, Jack, is you mentioned you have a remote team, people in different parts of the world, right? Then you would have you have your own reasons to having this remote setup. Does outsourcing become less important? What kind of impact do you think AI has? In other words, if I
Um,
needed 4 people to do something and I could not afford 4 people in the US, I hired one person here and perhaps looked out to a different country that was more affordable to hire those
yeah.
other 2 people. Let's take 10 people. Let's take 10 people, three in the
Yeah.
US, maybe seven someplace else that was
Yeah.
more affordable. With AI, people have different opinions, but let's say you can get it done with 4 people. Where you needed 10 people, you needed 40% of that team, which seems
Yeah.
like a stretch, but I think it's an all right number because I've heard people tell me they need 20%. I was like, really? Then were you overstaffed to begin with? If you had 10 people and you needed two here, I don't know if AI is the solution. I think you had a different problem
Yeah.
perhaps to begin
Yeah.
with already, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
100%.
whatever that number is, you kind of get the drift here. So, do I, given AI, can I hire that extra person right next to where I live and not worry about outsourcing? Or do you think
Mm.
outsourcing is still here to stay?
Yeah, great. No, that is a good question. I think I really don't think of it as outsourcing, right? For me, I really, really believe that like talent is evenly distributed, and so you can find someone as good as someone in the US in any part of the world. And I think I think people have for some reason conflated um, outsourcing with cheaper labor and maybe I can hire more people because I've outsourced and it's cheaper or whatever it is. I just fundamentally disagree with that premise completely. I think that engineers in any random part of the world can be just as good as those in the US or Europe or whatever way you want to chop it up, right? Um, and so I feel very strongly about that. I think then does it affect outsourcing? It affects outsourcing if you think of outsourcing as loads of extra people doing things for cheaper, doing really defined small tasks, right? Like menial tasks. If that's kind of the lens you're looking at outsourcing, sure, AI is going to be able to do so many of those jobs. But if you view outsourcing as I'm hiring the most talented person for my business, regardless of where they are, then I don't think outsourcing changes at all, right?
Jack, I'm going to make life difficult for you. Sorry.
Yeah,
I agree. Your point
yeah,
is valid. The
yeah,
point is, what you're saying is, hey, there are talented people all over the world.
yeah,
So that's what it is. Now I don't disagree. But with
yeah,
that said, I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
yeah, yeah,
Say you're in Dublin, right?
yeah,
You need somebody to help you with AWS Bedrock. I'm just going to take something I'm looking
yeah,
at recently. Now, there's a good chance you are going to find somebody who's pretty good. And if you set your mind, not just your mind, your budget and whatnot, to say that, you know what, I'm
yeah,
actually not going to look for anybody outside Ireland,
yeah,
then there is a decent chance. I mean, Ireland is a small enough country. Sorry, so
yeah, 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 100%.
not that many people. Let's take
Exactly.
US as an example, right? We have 330 million people. I've never, I cannot think of a scenario in the last n number of years of living and working in the US, and I've only worked here pretty much,
Yeah,
that I was like, you know what? Oh, I need to solve this problem. But guess what? I cannot find anybody in the country. So I'm going to have to go to India to find this person.
yeah,
I know people are going to be like, Krish, I hate you for saying this, but that's my opinion.
yeah,
Uh, no, that's not the case. We
yeah,
can find somebody here, but I now want to go to Bangalore to find a good developer, because I know I can find phenomenal developers in different parts of India. But my intent in doing that, Jack, was to actually find somebody who was more affordable, not because I could not find that person here for doing the job necessarily. I mean, do you see what I mean?
No, I 100% understand what you're saying. Um, but sure, sure. No, you're right. You're right. You're like, okay, if the two people can do the same job and one can do it
And
for
let's
less.
say, and you know what, I don't want to put you on a spot there, but let's say whether
Yeah,
or not it's true, or I don't want you to agree with to that.
yeah, yeah,
But let's say it's a hypothesis, and let's pretend that that were to be true in some scenario. I want to get your thoughts on, would that have an impact on outsourcing? Because companies are like, you know what, I know it's expensive where I live in Europe and in Germany or in London or in Switzerland, but I'm going to hire fewer people and I'm going to rely on bots doing the rest of the stuff, which means my dependency on resources in other parts of the world has actually diminished. Because if that were to be the case, companies like Upwork would have to completely rethink their strategies.
yeah. I mean, so sorry, would rephrase the question for me. So the
The
question is,
question is, in 2 years down the road,
yeah,
do you think we're going to be in a world where people are going to look for resources more locally, because where they couldn't afford more local resources, they replace them with bots, but their need to go overseas 10,000 miles away is actually not pressing anymore?
uh, I no, I think sure, I think AI can do a bunch of the work, but I don't know if outsourced work is the ultimate loser there, right? Like I think for sure for a portion of the work it will be, right? So what I mean by that is like, can AI just generate a great product photo for your e-commerce brand today? And before I used to pay someone on Upwork, yes, that job's gone, right? That's gone. But at the same time, like when you want a marketing manager, a recruiter, or whatever it is, right? Just because they're in the US and using AI doesn't make them better than the person who's in India using AI, right? And so if there's still a role to be done in a country, let's say, and it doesn't require being there physically, and somebody in a different country can do it just as good, right? Like that job's still going to be outsourced, I think, in your sense,
Okay,
right?
so what you're saying is, if I am a developer in the US in a lighter vein, let me qualify that.
Yeah,
What you're saying is, if I'm a developer in the US and I was worried about my job being outsourced, like the NBC series from like 15 years
yeah,
ago,
yeah.
I have to now be worried about that as well, on top of AI coming after me, is what you're saying there, Jack. No, I'm just messing with you,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, actually, the 100, like you can take that from both sides. You can say 100% yes, or you can look at it from the other side, which is, hey, like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, when everyone was saying all these develop software jobs were going to be outsourced, and that never really seemed to happen at the level people said it was. And now it's AI instead of outsourcing. So some people would look at it and say, okay, AI isn't going to take all the software jobs. Outsourcing didn't take all the software jobs, right? And so that's one way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it is, hey, outsourcing didn't take all the software jobs, but now AI is, right? Um, and I think neither are fully true. I think AI takes some of the software jobs, but I still think outsource, the way you're kind of describing it here, someone who's outsourced and using AI is still just as competitive as the person who's in the US and using AI, and they're probably more competitive than the people who are in the US and, God forbid, not using AI. You know?
Totally right. And
Yeah,
like one
yeah,
of the, I think I read the CEO, was the CEO of Fiverr or Fiverr, the
yeah, yeah,
freelancing
yeah, yeah.
side. I saw that recently where he had said that, hey, everything that was easy enough to do is now going to be done by humans anymore. I'm paraphrasing what I believe he had
Yeah.
said. It was actually very good. He said, everything that's easy enough to do, bots are going to replace that. So those jobs are gone. Whatever was really hard to do now is not going to be that hard to do using AI. And whatever was impossible to do now would be hard to do using AI, but it's still doable. So the crux or the gist of what he, I believe, was trying to say was, you're going to have to get ready as a freelancer. The things are never going to be the same again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are going to have to keep up to speed with whatever it is which is generally true, but it's as true as it could have ever been, in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That was my last question to you, Jack.
Yeah.
Before we call it wraps, and I have a non-technical question for you.
Yeah.
Any questions you have for me?
I don't know. I think I mean, you talk to a lot of technical people, right? And so if you were to take like a poll of sentiment over the last 12 months, do you think the technical people that you talk to, do you think they're more bullish on AI or more bearish? Hey, is AI taking all the engineering jobs, or hey, are we entering this new era of just abundance?
I think it's a great question. It really depends on the stakeholder, but I'll just take as engineers, right? Developers
Yeah,
per se. My take is, if you're a good engineer, you genuinely believe that AI is here to stay. In
yeah,
other words, you never thought it was hype. I mean, how can you look at Jensen Huang and watch what he's saying and be in denial? It's going to take a lot of mental stamina to be in
yeah,
absolute denial. And I'll quote a couple of things I read recently and I watched. Uh, Mark Zuckerberg had asked Satya Nadella a question, I think very recently, as to how much of the code at Microsoft, the largest, I think Nvidia beat them. Maybe I don't know what the stock market was today. Maybe round about there, but I think Microsoft may well be the largest company, at least on this Thursday. How much of that code was written by AI?
yeah,
I was expecting a fairly big number, given the millions and millions of lines of code that Microsoft would actually have. But I was taken aback by the size of the number. He actually said about 30%. And I don't know if it's 30% of code that's currently being written or to be written in future. I take it as that, not so much code that has been written over the years. But that's one third of the company. And I saw some news the other day that said they're going to have tons of layoffs. Microsoft's going to let go of a ton of people.
yeah,
And the math adds up, which is no different from the Anthropic co-founders stating some time ago, recently, a couple of months back, saying in 6 to 9 months, a lot of our work is going to be done by AI. And Zuckerberg himself saying that there's probably lesser and lesser need for mid-level engineers at Meta going forward. When you see all of that, now if you're an engineer who loves what you do and believes in these hyperscalers and companies, it's going to take a lot of guts and mental strength, right, Jack, to disagree with these people. I mean, if you wake up one morning as an engineer and you disagree with Jensen Huang, Mark
yeah,
Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, whether you like him or not for other reasons, it's impossible to disagree. And if they're wrong, I would rather be on their side of being wrong than be on the other side and try to be right at some point down the road. So I think it's unquestionable. The only question I had in my mind, sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but I'm just trying to share with you everything I have in terms of learnings from the last many weeks, right? I went to a World Economy Summit last week or a week ago in DC, where they had 200 of the Fortune 500 CEOs come and talk for like 20 minutes or so. And I've shared a bunch of that on LinkedIn. And if I'm not connected to you, I'll certainly connect with you there as well. Uh, where they talked about tariffs, because that was in the news at the time, but they
Yeah.
also talked as much about AI. And the thing I was interested in learning was, what is the return on investment? Not just how much money they are spending, because a lot of these hyperscalers and other companies have been spending a ton of money on AI, $100 billion a quarter or some big number like that. A lot of them said they're getting a 40% return on investment, which was not something I was expecting to hear. And I not heard that last year, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
which means companies have not just continued to invest, they're actually seeing returns, which means
Yeah.
they're going to spend more money. It's a circle, right? It's just a
Yeah.
circle,
100%.
which means, long story short, I think you've got to be in denial to believe that you're going to not have to do things differently, not
100%.
have to learn things differently. I feel that the typical composition of an engineering team is going to be so different 6 months, 12 months down the road. Like, it's not going to be like three developers, one product manager, one
No.
tester, the typical structure that we are all used to. I think those roles have become less defined. In
Yeah.
other words, I can see a product manager contribute to the code base more than ever before, because with all the AI tools, and if they have the aptitude and the interest, they are able to contribute to the code base using Cursor or other tools and whatnot. And they might still go to a developer to kind of do some checks and balances. But software development has to be, you have to turn it in its head and change it, because anytime we go back to doing something, Jack, I'll be very honest with you. We have 8 APIs in production. We are a well-oiled machine, so we can churn out a lot more APIs in quick time. But we've sort of taken a step back and slowed ourselves down intentionally to see, not what we want to do, but how we should be doing it is something that we've actually stopped ourselves from doing it the way we have done some of the things in the past, because we've got to convince ourselves and appease ourselves first before we appease somebody else. So it's not a matter of just adding more APIs, more and more APIs to the marketplace. It's figuring out what kind of APIs to add, how should we build them, and how should consumers be able to adapt and actually consume them. So I think we are at an inflection point. The younger you are,
100%.
more power to you. I've done this half my life, probably hope I have another half my life to go doing this, but it's more unlearning. Every day I come,
Yeah.
I'm trying to unlearn what I know, trying to just almost trash some of my learnings, as difficult as that is as a developer, saying, you
Yeah.
know what, Krish, I know you've done this, it works, you can get that to work, but don't do it that way. You know what, please don't do it that way, because you'll regret doing it that way. You'll regret more regrets than doing it slowly, which is why we've slowed ourselves down. So hopefully I said a lot of things there, but the essence of it hopefully is not lost, which is, I am strongly on the side of no, 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 no. You're going to have to do things very differently. Now,
Yeah.
how differently is the only question. I asked you about conversational interfaces and AI agents and interactions and whatnot. But the one thing I would say is, developers seem to be more willing to accept it, in my opinion. I've talked to other stakeholders who are pretty passionate and very smart people, who sometimes believe that AI impact on their roles is not going to be as much. I actually disagree. I think the impact of AI is going to be pretty much the same no matter who you are, right? White collar, blue collar, it does not matter. You could be this distinguished architect in some fancy place. You got to
Yeah.
be worried as much as the junior developer who's joining the team. I mean, I don't know, Jack, would you agree?
Yeah. I think I do agree. I honestly, like everything you said there, 100% agree with. I think I would just change the way you said it, though. You said where everyone should be worried, and I would say, whether you're a junior or a senior, I wouldn't say worried is the word, though. I know you probably don't mean it like that, but what I'm saying is everyone should be uh,
Excited?
excited about the opportunity in front of them, because you know, like if you're a pessimist, I think you do sound smart, and if you're an optimist, you have a chance at winning, right?
Right.
And so I think there are loads of things to be that would cause you to be worried, right? You game things out in your head. What if this happened and all the jobs would go away? All these things, right? I can understand why that would drive anxiety or fear or worry for somebody, but I think you gotta like have the mentality to like all the stuff you said, right? Which is take a step back, figure out how you can incorporate these things, push forward. Some principles, basic principles like we talked about, those remain the same, but like just constantly iterate and push forward. And like if you're an engineer, and that's obviously the kind of the group we were talking about there, is like your job is to solve problems, right? And it's to iterate and to move quickly. And like as you said, those things don't go away, and actually they might actually become easier. You can go better, you can go faster, you can be cheaper, whatever it is. And so like I'm massively optimistic about it, right? So to answer my own question,
No,
I think
beautiful.
the jury's still out, but I'm long all of this stuff.
Oh, lovely. Beautifully said. I know it was my last question, but I have one last one. I promise this is
Okay.
the last one, which is, do you see universities preparing? If I was in college for 8 years, I don't know
Yeah.
why. I was just there.
Yeah.
And then after I graduated, I was like, you know what? I probably shouldn't have even gone to college if I had the choice. It was almost like the society expecting people to have a diploma, and then you have to do whatever it is you had to do, at least the part of the world I grew up.
Yeah.
Uh, but I enjoyed my time. But after I started working is when I started learning how to actually do things, right? College work was not particularly helpful,
Yeah.
which is true for a lot of the people. And as we speak today, Jack, do you see universities prepare students, even if you focused on engineering per se,
Yeah.
to what's there, or are they stuck in time where they're teaching engineering and software like it was in the past?
I mean, when I was at university, I don't think taught software. I mean, and no practical software development was taught, right? I learned everything. I learned from like osmosis, from the internet, from reading. Like I used to just devour GitHub repos like they were books, and that's how I learned a lot of things, right? Not from sitting in a lecture or like writing code on a piece of paper in a test or whatever. Like that never worked for me. But like and so just to go back to your university question, which is like I think like in Ireland and in certain parts of the world, like university is just not as expensive as the US, right? Um,
So you don't have to borrow like
I,
$200,000 and waste 4 years
exactly,
before you got a diploma. Yeah.
exactly. So is anything worth that and putting yourself $200,000 in debt when you might not, or you're not guaranteed the ROI on the other end right now? That's questionable. Whether you should do that, that's questionable. I would say maybe not. Is there no benefit to university? That's also wrong in my opinion, because I always like to say, hey, you can have anything that you want as long as you know what that is, right? And so that time that you have, if you're lucky enough to have it, to explore things, to learn things, to figure out what you like, what you want to do, that is very, very valuable, right? Yeah, and so to some degree, university provides that to some people. It lets them figure out what they do want to do. So when they go out to get their job, they know they're all in on that. They can focus on that. They can develop on that. Um, and so it's a balance, right? I think there isn't a place for the 200 grand in debt, um, but there is still probably some place for people to explore and learn and figure a way they should focus all their energy.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Those are all my questions. I have one non-technical question which I ask of all my guests. Before I ask that, I'm going to say, again, folks, this was a phenomenal conversation. There was plenty of learning I've had talking to Jack Kennedy in the last an hour and a half. Jack, thank you very much for taking the time. Jack is the co-founder and CEO of Whippy, a sales marketing automation platform. I'll include the links, when we publish
Thank
the
you.
podcast. So folks, certainly go check out Whippy, or hit up Jack on LinkedIn. I'll include a LinkedIn profile, and if there's other links that you'd want for us to include, Jack, just let us know, and we are happy to do that as well. So this was amazing. I just want to thank you before I forget to do that, which
No, no.
which I
Thank you for having me.
genuinely
It's
mean.
been a great chat.
Lovely. The before I'm going to share something about Ireland. Not that I know anything about it, and then I ask you the last non-technical question. You know, we travel not a whole lot as much as they would like to, but we save all our money for European travels. Right? We love Europe to travel to. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Um, Ireland is a place I haven't been to. I've been to England a couple of times. We watched a movie called Leap Year. I don't know if you've heard of that movie.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably 10 years old. I don't know, maybe more.
Yeah.
It's Amy Adams, right?
Yeah.
And then I can't remember the name of the guy who's the actor in Severance, the Apple show. I can't remember his name. He had a small role to play as well. It was a beautiful movie. I mean, we like it as a family. We watch it every year, once a
Yeah.
year on New Year's Eve. So the story is Amy Adams is trying to February 29th, at least the myth was he proposed to a guy and he cannot refuse and he has to get married. Something silly, but it's really funny. And every time we think Ireland, we think about that place, and then the other act they go to Dublin from the small town. So hopefully, it was shot in Ireland. I believe it was, because a lot of times you watch these movies, like I watched Proposal, which was
Yeah.
supposed to have been shot in Alaska, and I read later that it was shot in Massachusetts. I think most of the movie was not even in Alaska. So maybe Leap Year was actually shot in Ireland. If it is, I would highly recommend it for light watching.
Yeah.
Unrelated to our conversation. So the very last non-technical question to you, Jack, is what is your favorite food? And if it's something not everybody might understand, you may have to explain that.
Oh yeah, no. So we have a team all over the world, right? As I was saying, so like people are always telling me about their foods, or like I met some of our team in London and they brought food from different cultures. David is he's Persian, so when we go to LA, we always get Persian food, which I love. But honestly, there's no real Irish food, right? It's maybe at a stretch, it's potatoes, right?
No, it doesn't have to be Irish, but
But
what is
I
your
know, I
favorite
know,
food?
I know. But so my favorite food with that is spaghetti bolognese.
You say, what is it? Spaghetti and?
Spaghetti bolognese.
Okay, so I'm
So pasta bolognese.
sorry. I am vegetarian and I know
Oh
spaghetti
no,
and
there you go.
pasta, but not.
Yeah,
So is it
pasta and like meat sauce.
oh, meat sauce? Okay,
Yeah,
that sounds simple enough.
yeah.
Yeah,
It couldn't be more simple than that. Yeah.
Okay, this is awesome. Uh, that's all I have, and I think this was great. This conversation, at least, just to recap. I don't recap. It's going to take me several sentences. Any closing statements, Jack, and then we'll call it wraps. But after you're done, just stay on the call for a couple of seconds so the upload completes. Yeah. What are your
Sure.
closing comments? Yeah.
Yeah, my closing comments are just thanks so much for having me on the call. It's great to chat. And if anyone's interested in learning about what we're doing, or looking for their next engineering role, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat as well.
That's it. With that, folks, again, I'm going to include links to Jack and Whippy on the podcast. Definitely check out the company. That's all there is from today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.